I'm no tech genius, but I knew if I wanted my business to crush it, I needed a website now. Thankfully, Bluehost made it easy. I customized, optimized, and monetized everything exactly how I wanted with AI. In minutes, my site was up. I couldn't believe it. The search engine tools even helped me get more site visitors. Whatever your passion project is, you can set it up with Bluehost. With their 30-day money-back guarantee, what do you got to lose? Head to Bluehost.com. That's BLUEHOST.com to start now.
So back in 2015, a little over a year after Brülosophy officially got off the ground, we released a survey asking homebrewers all kinds of questions, a good chunk of which weren't even related to brewing and beer necessarily, with the goal of getting some idea of what modern homebrewers look like. This admittedly was somewhat selfish for me, as I find this kind of information fascinating on its own. While a few more cynical folks assumed we were using this data for nefarious purposes, I have no clue what that would even look like. The general response was quite positive. Still, we viewed it as a one-time thing and skipped doing the survey in 2016. Then people started asking us about it a lot of people, in fact, including some who thought the data could be helpful in understanding how to make this hobby even better. So in 2017, we did it again, and we've not missed a year since then. This is the Brülosophy podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and joining me on this episode to go over and share our opinions on some of the data from our 2025 General Homebrewer Survey is contributor Andy Carter.
I think it's almost needless to say, but this website is a data generation place. We read data, we take data, we use a lot of it. And I think it's pretty cool that we have such an audience to gather real statistics from in homebrewing, albeit a very specific niche of homebrewing. I don't know if it's a niche. I don't know if I would call Brülosophy a niche of homebrewing anymore, but a certain kind of person is reading and taking it to heart. So it's pretty cool. And I think this data analysis is amazing. It's just really cool to dive into, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, so over the years, we've talked about addressing this data on an episode of the Brülosophy podcast, but for whatever reason, it took us this long to get around to doing it. I think part of the reason is that the survey covers a ton of stuff, so it would take way too much time to cover everything in a single episode. So what we're going to be doing here is a little bit of cherry picking, and of course, seeing as this is a Brews Views, we're going to be sharing our unabashed opinions on this data as well. Now, please keep in mind that our Brews Views series is where we let loose a little bit more than usual and may use language some people aren't really a big fan of. It's not our intention to offend anybody, just speak a bit more candidly about certain topics, which is exactly what we'll be doing today. All right, if you enjoy this show and you want to help us to keep producing it, we would love for you to become a patron of Brülosophy as well, which you can do over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. This month, June of 2025, the guest is Brülosophy's resident traditionalist, at least when it comes to lagers, and one of the best brewers I know, Jordan Folks. I believe the last time he was on was right when he became a contributor. In addition to his years with Brülosophy, Jordan has a ton of experience competing and brewing a variety of styles, from classic lagers and hoppy IPA to tangy sours. To be part of this session, make your pledge of just $3 or more by Saturday, June 28th, 2025, as Jordan will be hanging out on Sunday, the 29th. All past sessions are stored on our private Patreon and YouTube pages, so patrons can go back and watch them whenever they like. Learn more about all of the rewards we offer for your support and become a patron today over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. Another really easy way to support us is by using the links found at Brülosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your shopping experience doesn't change at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral that helps us to cover the costs of running all of this stuff. Finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and review of this show in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, that would be awesome too. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who, in addition to having an awesome YouTube channel chock full of great brewing-related content, sell what we believe to be are some of the best electric brewing systems on the market. If you've been considering making the move from propane to electric, you owe it to yourself to at least check out what Clawhammer Supply has. Whether you're after a 120-volt 5-gallon unit or something bigger and stronger like their powerful 240-volt 10-gallon system, Clawhammer has got you covered. Learn more about everything they have to offer over at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to check out their YouTube channel as well. Listener and patron Jedediah Allen from Bamberg, Germany, wrote in with some feedback after listening to our recent episode focus on smoked beer. Jed said, "Greetings from Germany. I loved the episode about smoked beer, and I highly recommend visiting Bamberg. I was fortunate enough while visiting Rotterdam in the Netherlands to come across an Imperial Sheep Dung Smoked Stout brewed by an Icelandic brewery named Borg Brugus. As strange, disgusting, and intriguing as it may sound, it was absolutely incredible. The smoke was subtle and had a pleasant sheep cheese flavor that was perfectly balanced by the sweetness and boozy, toasty malt background. It was such an experience that I will never forget. Definitely not something you could get away with commercially in the States." What do you think about sheep shit beer here?
I mean, I love the internet, man. You'll never hear about this stuff without the internet, and so glad to hear it. I mean, smoked beers, those are always going to be polarizing. This sounds like ultra polarizing to me. I bet it was fantastic though. It makes sense. Kind of makes just jives with everything I know about that area and that type of brewing. I'd give it a shot. I'm good. I've drank a lot of beer in my life. I'm down for something weird.
Yeah, I'm with you. As gross as beer made with burnt sheep poo may sound to some people, it doesn't really bother me at all. I'd have no problem at least trying it. And when you think about, peat malt and how peat malt is made, it's smoked over burning peat. Well, what's peat? Who knows what the hell's in peat?
Exactly.
Because it's like his prehistoric, basically. So I don't see it as being any more gross than that. And in fact, sheep cheese is delicious. I've had it before. So if you can make a beer that tastes like that rather than bacon, and I love bacon, but I just don't like smoked beers in general. I've mentioned that before, that I'm just not a big fan of these smoked beers. But who knows? Maybe this sheep cheese, like smoky sheep cheese, that is very difficult to say after each other. Maybe it would be good and I would love it. But at the very least, if anybody has access to this beer and feels like sending some to me, I would absolutely serve it to my friends during one of our review episodes, but not tell them that it was made with sheep shit until after the fact.
Yeah.
So there's your challenge. If anybody out there really wants to get a good laugh, I'm open to helping you out. Thank you so much for the email and your support on Patreon, Jed. If you have show feedback, you could send it to feedback@brülosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. All right, when we return from this break, our views on the 2025 General Homebrewer Survey results.
Trading shouldn't have barriers. When Robinhood started, it was built to make trading more accessible. Now Robinhood offers more sophisticated trading tools. Experience the future of trading on Robinhood Legend, the all-new desktop platform that harnesses intuitive design to deliver a seamless experience for traders. Free to use with a Robinhood account, Robinhood Legend is designed for how you trade, with powerful charts including custom intervals down to the tick, and over 80 indicators and drawing tools. Trade all your favorite assets, including popular stocks and ETFs, all in one place. Take your trading to the next level by customizing your layout in seconds and even enter and exit positions in one tap right from the chart with up to 8 charts per layout. The future of trading is fast, powerful, and precise. Experience it now on Robinhood Legend. Sign up today. Investing is risky. Robinhood Financial LLC. Member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. Other fees may apply.
Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the Exchillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to Exchillerator.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you.
So, when I ask, what is Odoo? What comes to mind? Well, Odoo is a bit of everything. Odoo is a suite of business management software that some people say is like fertilizer because of the way it promotes growth. But some people also say Odoo is like a magic beanstalk because it grows with your company and is also magically affordable. But then again, you could look at Odoo in terms of how its individual software programs are a lot like building blocks. I mean, whatever your business needs, manufacturing, accounting, HR programs, you can build a custom software suite that's perfect for your company. So what is Odoo? Well, I guess Odoo is a bit of everything. Odoo is a fertilizer, magic beanstalk building blocks. For business. Yeah, that's it. Which means that Odoo is exactly what every business needs. Learn more and sign up now at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. As a kid, I was pretty much always the odd one out. When everyone else was watching Star Wars, I was either reading the encyclopedia or watching some weird documentary. I'm pretty sure whatever it was that made me that way is also what led me into the career of psychology, as well as starting Brülosophy and my love of the human condition, which includes understanding other people, as well as this rad hobby, definitely influenced my decision to start the General Homebrewer Survey, which we've been doing now for over a decade, which is just crazy to think about. All right, to keep things from going too far off the rails, I thought what we would do is start off by focusing on some of the demographic data, which we've sort of touched on in the past. This might be uncomfortable for some people to hear. I don't want to, sugarcoat anything. We're going to speak our minds on this. This is Brew's Views. Again, we've touched on some of this information in the past, but this time it's going to be based on, the data that we actually collected ourselves. Now, first off, it's important to keep in mind that this survey is put out by Brülosophy, meaning it's most likely to be completed by people who follow or at least know of Brülosophy. We understand that while our reach is fairly vast these days, it's not a perfect representation of homebrewing across the world or possibly even the United States. But seeing as it does tend to align with data from other surveys, it probably is a fairly close approximation to what the modern homebrewer actually does look like. With that out of the way, let's jump right in with what I think is some of the more, again, I guess you could call it uncomfortable bits of data. Out of the over 1,500 people who responded to our survey this year, 98% of them reported being male, with just 2% saying that they're female, and less than 0.5% saying they're non-binary, and about 0.5% saying they're transgender. This whole issue of gender and homebrewing is something that I can't quite understand. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, Andy. There's nothing inherently about beer and brewing that that to me, at least in my mind, would attract one gender over the other, except for the fact that one gender has already kind of put their stamp on it and said it's theirs, right? What are your thoughts?
It's good. It's a good question, actually. So I think it's hard to say because the data is the data. So am I going to try to say the data is incorrect? I can only give you my own interpretation of it because it's my own, what I see at meetings and stuff. And I think it's more balanced than this. I think it's still dominantly male, but I know tons of female brewers. I do think you're right that there's some claim and maybe there's pushing people out, but I think what it is that if you look at the nationwide, maybe my area is a subset, it's sampling bias. But I think it just depends on where you're going to go and learn how to brew in that regard. And I think what other people are around, and I think we've fostered a place where more everyone is welcome and is not so self-selecting. But it is a self-selecting hobby in that regard. And it's just maybe he's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that. It's tough. But it is, you said it was going to be a tough topic to talk about, but I think it is the reality. And if you want to change it, you have to start it locally. And wherever club you're in, if you don't like these demographics, that's where you have to go and try to force them the other direction.
I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I was talking with we were sitting at Crow and Wolf. This was a few years ago. My wife was there. We had some other couples who were around, most of whom are involved in the beer or brewing industry on some level at this point. And I remember posing the question to them, how do we get more females interested in this hobby when they're 50% of the population, and yet 2%. There was one survey we did, I forget what year, where it was 1%. I mean, even less. Now, as an aside, real quick, it may very well be that there's more than 2% females out there who are brewing that just didn't fill out the survey. I mean, that is always the case with everything we talk about. Again, part of that disclaimer. But still, it's going to be massively lower than males, and same with anybody who doesn't identify as a male. They're all going to be massively lower. When 98% of the people who responded to our survey consistently, are report being male. So I'm sitting there talking with this group of people, and I said, well, how can we make it more enticing for women to want to join? Mm-hmm. And one of I forget who it was, but one of the people who was there said, part of the problem is that mentality, is that when you try to force an interest on somebody, it's almost annoying, right? And as a psychologist, that is something that is very real. There's this almost oppositional thing. It's not, completely conscious. It's probably more subconscious that a lot of people experience when you say, hey, you're not doing this thing. You should do it. You'll love it. Part of me is like, even just saying that, you're like, that's presumptive, how do you know? And so there's this kind of fine line that we have to walk, it feels like, when it comes to making it appealing. And one of the responses I got, now this did come from a male who also homebrews, but he said, maybe the solution is not to focus on attracting people, but to focus on removing whatever barriers are there for those who are already interested.
Sure. That makes sense. So anything that's stopping you from taking it on, it make homebrewing easier for everyone to get into versus anything else. Sure.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move past that for now. We will stick with a couple more demographics that I just think are kind of interesting. So 34% of respondents were said that they were between the age of 30 and 39 years old. That was the majority, or the plurality, with another 29%. So making it the majority being between 40 and 49 years old. So you've got what is that? 63% of all respondents are between 30 and 49 years old. Probably not shocking to most people, but I feel like just 10 years ago, it would have been 20 to 40 years old as opposed to 30 to 49 years old. You know what I mean?
I think this is what you're watching here, and this is something we've noticed with the Homebrew Beer Festival, so Southern California Festival, is the population. There was a big increase in the population during the 2008 recession, and now that wave, that cohort is aging. And that's why it's kind of moving that direction. I think that's why the 30 to 39 is the largest, followed by the 40 to 49. But yeah, it is an aging population, put it that way. But middle age, I guess.
Yeah, well, and you think about what it takes to be able to homebrew. You have to have a place where you can do it. You have to have the money to afford doing it. And, I started brewing when I was 22, early, almost 23. But, I wasn't able to brew nearly as often because it's not cheap. It's arguably cheaper than a case of beer. I get that, but you got to buy all your gear. And then again, you have to have a place to do that. So people who own their own homes and are making a decent income and have a job that doesn't require them to work late nights or anything like that tend to be more capable of engaging in hobbies like this. So that's what I mean by it's not terribly surprising to me, but like you said, there does seem to be this window of people who are in homebrewing that are staying in homebrewing, and we're kind of maybe tracking that window more than we are anything else, because we're just not seeing that many more new people come into the fold, which is kind of interesting. Another really unfortunate piece of this data, in my opinion, is that 95% of all respondents identified as being Caucasian or white. 95%. That's wild to me.
Yeah. No, I think that it's also that. Yeah. I mean, it's, again, I'm self-selecting, self-biased. In California, we have everyone at every meeting. I don't see that as the same data, but that's California versus, rest of the United States. And the survey is generally from the United States, 66%, which we'll talk about later. There's some definitely outside that. But of that 66%, the 95% white. Yeah, I could see that. It is, again, self-selecting. again, try to lower the barriers is what you said is the best way to do it. But yeah.
Yeah, where I live, we have a very large Hispanic population, and so I don't see the 95% either. It's actually the same as you were saying with the whole male-female thing. Is we've got the local homebrew club where I live, the Central Valley Warthogs. They have had women on the board over the last few years, which is awesome to see, and females showing up to homebrew club meetings regularly and organizing things and all of that. So same thing with people who are non-white. There tends to be a decent amount of those folks who are also participating, which I think is great. Now that's just the club. When I go out to pubs, when I'm, if I'm talking to other homebrewers, the truth is that the majority really do seem to fit this very plain mold, white dudes with facial hair and, bellies, basically.
Yep.
So anyways, that's where we're at. This has been consistent since we started this survey. I feel like if we're going to talk about the information, we should at least address this. If you are the kind, I know there are some very interesting folks out there who couldn't give two shits about this kind of thing. I'm not one of them. I really do care about this, and I would love to see more people interested in this hobby. And I think a part of that is also the education that we're not just in it to get drunk, that there is something more valuable in homebrewing than just tying one on. And so how do we do that? I've talked with the AHA about this. I've talked with other outfits about this, and clearly we have not found the answer yet, but I think that the effort that we're putting into trying to find that answer may hopefully help out in the future. So, All right, on to the brewing stuff. This is kind of like the hybrid brewing / demographic stuff that I just think is really interesting. And we're going to be doing, not 100% of the time, but we are going to be comparing the 2025 data to some past data, just because it's fascinating to look at. So one of the questions we ask is, how many years have you been brewing? What is your, total brewing experience? So in 2025, you had 4% of people say that they've been brewing for less than 1 year. 14% of people said 1 to 3 years. So right there, 0 to 1 month or so to 3 years, you've got 18% of people. Back in 2018, that was 39% of respondents. Wild, right? So you've got between 4 to 6 years, 21% of people in 2025, 30% of people in 2018. Not a huge difference. Between 7 to 10 years of brewing experience, you got 19% in 2025, 15% in 2018. But here's the real banger. People who have been brewing for 10 plus years. Back in 2018, that was 16% of all of our respondents. About the same who said that they had been brewing for 7 to 10 years, right? In 2025, we went from 16% to 42% of our respondents said that they had been brewing for 10 or more years. Yet again, to me, Andy, this seems to suggest that we are kind of getting this picture of a window of people who have been staying in the hobby, and while less and less people are coming into the hobby. And so they are going to be the ones that stand out the most in surveys like this.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's also measuring maybe why some of the demographic data we just went over is skewed one direction, because these outreach efforts are just starting in some regard to hit the data. I will ask a clarifying question for you, Marshall. The years of brewing experience was as long as you're brewing once a year. I think that's how you structure the question correctly. Like you are actively brewing if you've brewed for this much, or did you have that caveat?
I'm not sure if we ask specifically the caveat, but we do say that people who are actively brewing are the ones that we want.
Gotcha. Okay.
Filling this out. And the thing is that, like any survey, I mean, we encounter surveys all the time nowadays in this digital age that we're living in. You could easily just open it up and lie on the whole thing. Sure. We're hoping that nobody does that, but it is intended for people who are active homebrewers. And we have a question about later on down the line about how many batches are you brewing a year and such. And so our hope is that it more or less covers people who are generally brewing, with some level of frequency.
Yeah, gotcha. No, I think it's also interesting because the 10 plus years metric, I think, comes a lot from the increase in online education. Previous to like 2008, it was books, Charlie Papazian's book, maybe a local homebrew club, maybe a large regional homebrew club. And then with the rise of kind of starting the Brülosophy and Homebrew Talk and those kind of websites, I think show that population got educated and stayed with it, right? They didn't try it and then it's like, oh, it isn't for me. They stayed with it and it's a sticky hobby, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Very interesting. All right. So in terms of brewing education, which you were just referencing, 30% of people said that they got their primary source of brewing education was online in written form. So like blogs and stuff like that. 27% said it was books. So still written, but your physical book. 23% said their primary brewing education came from online videos. Hello, YouTube. And 10% said podcasts. 8% said they learned from a friend. So again, when you compare this to past years, it has oddly remained very consistent. I would have expected podcasts to be way higher than 10%, but that's bias on my own part because we do podcasting. I also just listen to so many podcasts, but maybe that's a sign of my age or something. I know that YouTube now refers to a lot of what they do as podcasting.
Yeah, and I think at YouTube, I kind of caught me off guard because of the similar statistics I'm reading here. The main online community, 20% being YouTube. I never thought of YouTube as a community. I thought it was a place to go watch videos. So it's interesting that, and I think there's also a little generational thing. You like a podcast, I like a podcast. We do a podcast. We live in podcast, and that's maybe because we lived with radio growing up. We lived with AM FM radio growing up, right? So we're used to listening to people tell us something through a voice medium versus maybe a younger generation is used to watching a full video, right? Or something like that. I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's really no way to know, but that makes a lot more sense if you think about it generationally speaking. Yeah. My kids are Instagram and YouTube is where I wouldn't say that they learned so much from Instagram, but
sure.
YouTube is amazing. I mean, I was out working on my pool in the new house. Summer's here and we're all swimming and all that stuff, and just some stuff needed to be taken care of. Everything I needed to know, I learned in about 4 minutes on a YouTube video. The fact that it's there is very convenient.
I think the other one that we're not monitoring yet, but give another 10 years, is a ChatGPT AI learning is the next one.
It's coming
for the education. Yeah.
Yeah. Right now, though, my wife points this out often. Is as great as AI is, as smart, quote unquote, as AI is, it is so often wrong still.
Very true. Very true.
On so many things. So I would not rely on AI to teach you how to brew the best beer. But
as we talk about it, I try to get people using it at work just to get out there and start trying to do it. And I work in a pretty serious business, so they're not trying to use it because it will lie. The best way to use it is think of it as an intern that will lie to you whenever it feels like. That's what it is right now.
That's a good analogy. All right. In terms of, we asked people what their main online community is. This is just, again, we're just looking out of interest here. So in 2025, 35% of people said that their main online community was Reddit. That was the highest rated one in our survey for 2025. Back in 2017, it was 26%. And that was right behind Homebrew Talk, which was the highest rated in 2017 at 31%. But in 2025, just 9% of respondents. That's wild to me, Andy.
Yeah.
I mean, Homebrew Talk was like the thing back in 2010, 2011 when I was getting back into brewing and thinking about starting this thing. To go from 31% to 9% in 7-8 years, that's just crazy.
It really follows a trend of message boards. So anyone listening in 2025, message boards were everything in 2004, 2005, 2006. This is where you learned everything. It's very self-selecting community, very self-policing. And I've talked about this with other people that don't even do brewing. They do whatever, photography or whatever. And Reddit has just eclipsed all of those things. It's kind of like when we used to have, and this is really dating me, we had public access cable, a local TV show, it'd be produced by locals, right? And you would watch it on Channel 3 or Channel 5 or Channel 7 or whatever locally. All of that has been sucked up by YouTube and Reddit. It's just completely taken the wind out of those places. Now, thankfully, Homebrew Talk still exists. It's still Googleable, it's still searchable, and you can find data, because that's really was, like Marshall said, that was ground truth for many years of my homebrewing.
And unfortunately, a lot of what was spewed on Homebrew Talk, as in most forums back then, was nowhere near truth. But we all inhaled it and ingested it as though it was.
Exactly. It was the only thing I had. Would also have to go off of. Yeah.
Yeah, it's right. And I think a lot of, if I think, seriously about what really motivated Brülosophy and the experiment series, it was largely a lot of the stuff that I found online, namely Homebrew Talk. And that's not to say anything bad about Homebrew Talk. It was just the people on Homebrew Talk who spoke with such authority.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting to go from 31%, being the number one all the way down to number 4. Number 2 for 2025 was YouTube, actually, for online community. And like you, it took me a minute before I started to realize that YouTube is more than just a place to go to watch videos. You go down into the comments section and it is truly a community. I mean, there's nothing different about that than there is Reddit or Facebook or anything else. It's just attached to a good video usually. So 20% of people said YouTube, 18% right behind YouTube said Facebook. So all of the homebrewing Facebook groups that are out there, that's only down 2% from 2017 when it was at 20%. So not a big change there. That's kind of surprising to me. 7% in 2025 said Discord, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't even think we added that to the survey until like 2020.
Yeah.
Whenever Discord became a thing. I still can't figure out how to use Discord properly, but I do know that the Brew Club is very active. That is their most active forum, is the Discord, the Brew Club Discord.
I will say, like, a Discord or a Slack server is one that's coming up. I think also just my watching it from my homebrew club, or I call it my homebrew club, but I haven't gone to a meeting in so many years. Of Ventura Independent Beer Enthusiasts, I still think of it as my homebrew club. But the move out of Facebook into other platforms because of either privacy concerns or just ease of use. But Marshall, I am right there with you. I am in a lot of Discord servers. I still haven't figured out how to use Discord. I don't know if I ever will figure out how to use Discord. I'm trying my darndest though.
It makes no sense to me, which I guarantee there are people listening laughing at us.
Oh
right
yeah,
now
they just are
because
cackling at us right now.
I feel like an old man. The final one that we asked about was the AHA forum, the American Homebrewers Association forum. In 2017, that was at 5%. In 2025, it was down to 3%. So it seems to be losing activity. I don't know if that's a function of what's going on with the AHA and the Brewers Association, but there you have it in terms of main online communities. Another interesting bit of data that we collect on this one is we ask people about their homebrew club membership, and we offer various options. Right now, like the Brew Club, there are online homebrew clubs, and members of those online homebrew clubs are often also members of local homebrew clubs, in-person clubs. So 61% of people, that is such a high number. So the vast majority of respondents said that they are not a member of a homebrew club at all. And that increased from just 1 year ago. It was at 54% of people, and it went up to 61% in 2025. So it seems that the interest in homebrew clubs, it may be waning a bit compared to, say, 15, 20 years ago, when that was your main source of finding other people who shared this interest. And now I'm assuming, because of the just how much online community there is out there, that people no longer really see a need to engage on an in-person level, I guess. I don't know. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing here, because you see this yes online only as an option that's actually decreased, or it's like not as a percentage, it's just no homebrew club membership at all. So is that I always thought of it, and maybe this is the wrong algorithm, but this is my thought, was that homebrew clubs are there to learn how to homebrew. Yes, you made your friends, and actually my best friends are from my homebrew club, but I think that the change is that now homebrewing as a method to do something else, which is to have a party, to enjoy a hobby, the need for a club has gone down because the knowledge is out there. Yeah. You're not getting the technique out of the homebrew club. You're getting your camaraderie. So if you're getting your camaraderie through other means, then you're good. Versus I can learn because I've read Brülosophy, I've gone through things, I've got the data, I'm good to go. So it's a change. And we witness this too. I think I witnessed this in a lot of places. People are just independent contractors of homebrewing. They're no longer in a club.
Yeah, that's what it seems to be. Of the over 1,500 respondents, 29% said that they are a member of an in-person club only. 6% said that they're members of both local and online homebrew clubs, and then only 4% said that they are only a member of an online homebrew club. That 4%, I imagine, would be a good chunk of the people who are in the brew club, whom I hear from regularly saying, I'm so glad, that this was offered, because where I live, there's just no club around, And so I don't view this as necessarily being a bad thing, unless clubs that currently exist are suffering from it. But I've not really heard much about that. I know that clubs are going to be suffering because of the just downturn in beer and brewing in general. I get that. But the interest in doing more things online, or just not being a member of a club, I'm kind of neutral on that one. I don't really have strong opinions about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see all homebrew clubs are getting. I think the successful homebrew clubs are staying successful for the same reasons, and other clubs that maybe 2 or 3 people are going to zero because you need a critical mass, right? A homebrew club is not a club if there's not people at it. So
yeah. And you have to have a good number of people. You got to fund it. You got to have all of the board and all of that stuff. So now, speaking of membership, the next question we ask has to do with AHA membership. So those people who pay to be a member of the American Homebrewers Association. Again, we are in a kind of a weird purgatory right now when it comes to what's going on with the AHA. So that may have influenced the numbers for 2025. But here we go. 75% of all respondents said that they are not members of actively, participating in members of the American Homebrewers Association. 58% of them said they have never even been a member, and then 17% said that they have been a member but are no longer. So they let their membership lapse and don't plan to renew. 22% said that they are current members but still but plan to renew when their membership is up. And then another 3% said that they're current members and have no plan to renew once their membership lapses. That to me is an interesting piece of data. And it was actually, we added that because somebody from the AHA a few years ago asked if we might ask about it because they were curious to see what the data was.
Yeah, I think the AHA, like Marshall mentioned, it's the state of flux, be moving themselves out of the Brewers Association of their own independent entity. The lack of a homebrew con, lack of a camaraderie there. I guess I am a little surprised to see the 75%. That seems like a high number. I thought it would have been a little
really high.
Yeah, that seems. I thought it would have been a bigger, smaller chunk. But there you go. And then, but I think if I see it personally, the resource is some education, which has been supplanted, the attendance to conferences, and then the ability to enter the homebrew competition, right? So those are where I'm seeing the need. And if those things aren't just scratching your itches anymore, then it's not going to be a useful membership for you. But,
Yeah, I was talking with some people fairly recently about, what it is that's different about today versus 10, 15 years ago when it seemed like anybody who was even, remotely committed to homebrewing was a member of the AHA. And I think part of it is that, and this actually, some patrons were sharing some of their thoughts with me on this, and they were saying it just feels like they don't have anything to offer anymore. Homebrewing is legal in all 50 states, so they can't stand on that. They tried the whole homebrew Brew Guru app or whatever, and nobody was really pleased with that. I know some people were, but it wasn't a very big deal. It gets you into HomebrewCon, which they don't do anymore. Like all of these things that the benefits that it provided, people feel like it's not providing it to them anymore. There's still a Zimmergy magazine. Yep. Some people say all of that information is as nice as that magazine looks. And I personally think it's one of the most beautiful homebrewing magazines out there. Great information, but like this patron was telling me, it's not information I can't find online in 5 minutes, And so there's this feeling of like, well, why are we going to give our money to this association? So I'm doing my best not to go too deep into my thoughts on the AHA and membership there because we've talked about it so much in the past. I will say as an aside that I've had conversations with Julia Hertz from the AHA. We've had Drew Beecham on as one of our guests for patrons to ask questions of, and it was very, very revealing with all of the stuff that I truly, genuinely believe that they are trying to make the AHA a better, organization for members to attract members. And so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it turns into something really good and that we're able to make this thing kind of what it was in the past and get back to hosting really cool events and stuff like that. All right, so one of the questions we ask as well is about what recipe design software do you use? And we include I don't use anything to build my own recipes. So we try to keep it cover all of the different bases. For 2025, 45%, an easy plurality of respondents said that they use Brewfather, which has steadily increased over the last 5 or 6 years since Brewfather came out. They kind of hit the ground running and are now easily the most popular, at least according to our data, recipe design software out there. And they just offer a suite of every tool that you need for brewing, whether it's water chemistry, whether it's yeast propagation, hops, and the impact that age has on them. Very, very great. It's what I use. It's what I promote. I absolutely love Brewfather. So it's good to see that they're doing so well. 23% of respondents are using Beersmith. 14% use Brewer's Friend. 5% use personal spreadsheets. Andy, was it you who had a spreadsheet that you used?
Yes, I was like waiting for this data. Yes, someone is. This is the one of us spreadsheet users. Yes, I still to this day get an email once a month asking for this spreadsheet. So it's still out there.
That's awesome. So 5% of people, you're hearing from one of those 5% there, Andy. 5% said they don't design their own recipes at all. They just buy kits or whatever it might be. And then 3%, that's a pretty decent chunk, who say that they use the Grainfather recipe builder. Good job, Grainfather, for staying relevant there. That's pretty rad. But 45% Brewfather. I'm proud of those guys. They're doing great.
I mean, I like the the cloud nature. I think it's actually so funny because I think software. I'm an engineer by trade. For those that don't know, I'm an electrical engineer, microelectronics engineering by trade, and I think it's so funny that when I went to college, I did programming by necessity, right? You need to do programming to build something, to go on to engineer something, right? So I see software as like this thing that people just relegate to the back and never think about. But honestly, software is so important, and being consistent in my job and in homebrewing to me is so important. It's so ingrained in me that, like, why are we not taking software more seriously? That's why I was about that 5% doing Excel, because I wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes. But once you feel comfortable with a piece of software, especially like Brewfather, which we implemented in Brülosophy and use, it makes your life so much easier, and you trust it, and it makes consistent results. And then that just comes from like iterating and making good software. So when software is good, it completely changes your life. And I think it's echoed in these results.
Yeah, it is, and the UI is beautiful. It's just so simple and clean, and it feels modern. It doesn't feel clunky. I remember using, I think it was called Pro Mash or something like that.
That's like the Pro Brewers version of it. That's like using what's it like? It's using like QuickBooks on desktop.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
But it's clunky. It doesn't feel modern,
No, it's not modern.
Brewfather just feels so good, and everything you can change things quickly. And I look, they are a sponsor. I'm not going to pretend that they're not, but they're a sponsor because we love them so much.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you, if you're not using the paid version, you are missing out on a lot of really cool features of Brewfather. So just consider it. It's a really cool thing. The final piece of data we're going to talk about before we take a break and then move into even more brewing profile related stuff is the approach that brewers used when they were starting out. Okay. So I love this. We're going to compare when they were starting out to where they are currently. So we ask those side by side. So 31% of all people who responded in 2025 said that they started out brewing using the all grain method. That is mind-blowing to me, considering where I came from, where nobody started out all grain. In fact, some people who started brewing when I started brewing are still brewing extract because of the fear that we were sold about all grain brewing. Back in 2018, that was 25%. So not a huge difference, but still more and more people brewing all grain as their very first batch. I love how accessible all grain brewing has become for people.
Yeah, no, I think it's so funny because the same thing when I started, it was like all extract, and that's also like a financial consideration was like, the gear to get in. It's like, oh, if I'm not going to use the gear for the all grain, then why would I do it initially? Now, what I think I see the difference is that first, the better education, which we're going to say a lot during today, better education. The second is these all-in-one systems. It doesn't matter what you're brewing with, you're going to use the same thing, and it's more upfront cost, but like the utility is there automatically. It's not this like big capital investment as much as it used to be. So that's why I think all grain brewing is it is easier. And I will tell people that I'll say, like, if you like beer and you feel relatively handy, then just get into all grain. I think you're just going to have a better experience starting off. But then again, you can always do extract, and there's techniques. I've espoused them. Other people have espoused them. There are techniques in extract brewing that will make beer just as good, if not better, than all grain brewing. So it's not a limiter anymore.
Yeah, I struggle to agree with that because I've tried it myself, and maybe it's just bias. I don't know, but when I make extract beers, they don't ever taste quite as good as the all grain beers that I make. But who knows? What gets me is that it seems that people are starting to recognize something that we've been saying for a while is you don't have to start off brewing 5-gallon batches. And if you decide to go with, let's say, a 1 or 2 gallon batch route, you don't have to really buy much gear either. If you've got a stock pot,
true.
You know what I'm saying? And you can buy a brew bag for $30. You can get a cheaper one and make your own if you want. You can make a delicious batch of all grain beer with the same amount of effort, maybe a little bit more time. But if you go short and shoddy, not much more time as it would take you to make an extract beer. So I that's what I just think is so cool about it, is that people are starting to recognize that maybe that, that whole thing is we're not lying about that. So, all right. 22% of people said that they started with extract only plus a partial boil. And then 20% said that they did extract with steeping grains. That's weird to me that extract with steeping grains is lower than extract only and doing a partial boil. Partial boil, by the way, is just you boil it and then you dilute that strong wort in your fermenter, basically, to get to your full volume.
I think what it is that you're just seeing people do less than 5-gallon batches. So that means they're going to do everything full. And then the partial boil is not that they're doing. They can just do a 2-gallon batch in their starter kettle. I think.
Yeah. And yeah, so but the fact, extract with steeping grains was how I started. Now, 20% are doing extract with steeping grains plus a full boil, whereas 15% said they're doing extract with steeping grains and a partial boil. Those numbers haven't changed too much since 2018, so that's not surprising. But it is interesting. I remember when I got into it, one of the very first recommendations was, get a few batches under your belt, do an extract with steeping grains and a partial boil, but then buy a bigger kettle and do a full boil. You'll taste the difference. I'm surprised. I don't know if we've tested that out yet, but I'm surprised that more people are just doing a full boil with extract. If you're able to hold the full volume of a 5-gallon batch of wort, you're also probably able to do brew in a bag in that same kettle. So yeah. I would just recommend to those people, give it a shot. It'll save you some money and might taste better.
Maybe. Yeah. Makes sense.
So finally, 11% of people said they're doing extract only plus a full boil. That one is interesting because that means you're not really putting your spin on that wort makeup. You're just buying extract, boiling it, and then adding hops and fermenting it, which is great if that's what you do. Some people commented on this whole thing about, now mind you, this is how they started out. This isn't how people are currently doing it. We'll get to that in a minute. Some people were commenting, though, and I believe this is folks from down under, who were saying that they have like homebrew shops where you can just go buy like 5 gallons of pre-made wort. It's not even extract. You buy this wort, you take it home, and you just ferment it. I think that's kind of interesting as well. That is not a common thing, at least as far as I know, here in the States.
Yeah, I've never seen that in the United States. I only see that from people that posting from Australia or New Zealand. So it's very cultural.
Yeah. It's a cool way to get a quick batch of beer without putting much work into it. But part of what I love about brewing is the creativity and the fact that, I'm going knuckles deep in this stuff. So, all right. So that was how they started out. If it sounded otherwise, I do apologize. It gets confusing reporting this data. When we asked in 2025, what is your current brewing approach? 96% of people said that they brew all grains. So they jumped in 31% all grain, right? But all of those other ones, the rest of the 69% or 59% of people said that they brew with these extract in some form or other, but 96% of people currently brew using an all grain method, meaning only 4% are a mix of those other approaches, which is amazing. And that's only up 2% from 2018, where 94% of people said that they currently brew using all grain. Fascinating.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense that eventually, if you've convinced yourself you're going to do this as a hobby, you know that this is the way to go, and then this is your only method, because it doesn't make sense, like you said, to limit your palate, other than some other technical reason or availability. Pretty much anywhere you homebrew, you're going to be able to get grain. Getting extract is probably possible, but it just makes sense, and then you get to do everything you want. Your creative palette just opens up to infinite combinations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good thing to see, because I'm just of the opinion that people who brew all grain are probably going to stick around and brew more often than those who brew extract. Oh, I get that you can make a great beer using extract. I don't think you have as much control, though.
That's fair.
I think by nature of the fact that somebody else is producing that extract, you just have less control. And it's when you have full control of what that beer, how it's going to turn out, and all of the ingredients that you're picking, I think is where we really start to get obsessed with this hobby, because there are millions of different options. Whether you brew to style or not, not, you have so many options, and the brewing world is your oyster. Well, we've got to get to a quick break. We're going to be right back with more views on the 2025 General Homebrewer Survey results.
Are dry eye symptoms frequently interrupting your day? Keep dry eyes off your schedule with Refresh Reliever PF Extra Lubricant Eye Drops, offering an advanced formula to soothe and hydrate your eyes. With innovative hydrocell technology to lock in moisture and prevent further irritation, Refresh Reliever PF Extra gives you lasting relief. Equipped with a soft squeeze multi-dose bottle featuring a double lockout system that keeps drops sterile, so you can feel confident using it. Refresh has been delivering relief from dry eye symptoms for 35 years. It's a track record of success that has earned the trust of physicians and patients alike. You deserve relief from your dry eye symptoms, and your eyes deserve extra. Find Refresh online or in the eye drop section at all major retailers. FSA and HSA eligible.
We all know that designing recipes is really fun, and doing it well is so much easier with good software. We at Brülosophy recently made the switch to Brewfather, and honestly, y'all, we could not be happier. Brewfather utilizes the latest technology to bring you the most robust cloud-based recipe design software that can be accessed anywhere, on your phone, tablet, desktop, and even offline. It also works seamlessly with numerous third-party devices to make it easier to monitor every step of your brew. I know change can be difficult, but trust me when I say you need to go to brewfather.app today to try it out for yourself. That's brewfather.app.
Imagine you're a business owner relying on a dozen different software programs, each one disconnected, more expensive, and more complicated than the last. It can be incredibly stressful, right? Now, picture Odoo. Odoo brings all the tools your business needs into one simple platform. CRM, accounting, inventory, manufacturing, marketing, HR, and more. All seamlessly connected. Everything works together, giving you the peace of mind that your business is running smoothly from every angle. Odoo's open source applications are user-friendly and designed to scale with your business, saving you time and money. Say goodbye to juggling multiple platforms and hello to efficient, integrated management. Stop wasting resources on complicated systems and make the switch to Odoo today. Visit odoo.com, ODOO.com, and discover how Odoo can simplify and streamline your business operations. Odoo, modern management made simple.
There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of work, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. When I made the jump to all-grain brewing back in 2010, I went with the method that seemed the most manageable to me, which was batch sparging. At the time, it seemed that was probably the most popular approach, but is it these days? Well, let's see. When we asked people what all-grain these are just the all-grain brewers, those 96% of people who reported being brewing all-grain currently, they went on to another question that said, what method do you use for your all-grain brewing? So breaking it down even further, 47% of people in 2025, this is crazy, 47% said that they're using an all-in-one electric system. Wow. That is compared to 2018, where 13% of people said that they were using all-in-one electric systems. Nuts.
It's awesome because I think it was also in my brewing. I mean, yes, I joined Brülosophy and started doing all electric systems, but I was going to go there eventually. Just, marshal up, kickstart my effort to go into all in one. But they make a lot of sense because then it's all there, it's all together, and you're not doing this piecemeal modular thing, which I was doing before, which is great. But it was a nice upgrade to have. And what I see with the all-in-one systems is that you can enter at any price point you want. Yes, it's more than just like, DIY, but every dollar you spend towards the next system gets you that nicer thing, that little nicer part, and you can spend as much money as you want and have electric or all-in-one. I guess all-in-one means electric. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but all-in-one means something that's probably electric. So you get to reap the benefits of larger capital investment.
Yeah, I love this data. My opinion on that is hell yeah. I just think it's so cool to see that. And when you really think about it, take kind of a big step back and you look at this rapid increase in people being okay brewing with an all-in-one system, meaning you've got one kettle where you're doing your mash and your boil, right? Well, just 10 years ago, that would have been shit on so hard by people who thought that you had to do a proper mash and then a proper lauter and then, sparge and do all of this. No, what we've done is we've embraced the reality that these things that some of us were just drilled into our heads that have to happen really don't have to happen in that way. The all-in-one systems are effectively based off of brew in a bag. They usually come with a stainless basket nowadays, but that's what that whole method is based off of. So kudos to the people who introduced brew in a bag to us from down in Australia. It has changed the way people homebrew, and I think that's rad. Speaking of brew in a bag, 25% of respondents in 2025 said that that's the method they use, where that compared to 33% in 2018. So I think what we're going to see is that all of the other methods out there, the common methods, are going to go down in part because the all-in-one system, the people moving into all-in-one systems are pulling those numbers down.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just makes sense. And then I like the idea. He mentioned the stainless. Like, I want a system that's going to be reliable over time, and we've talked about in a previous episode about blenders where things fail for various reasons. And actually, I like the integrity of these all-in-one systems. They work well and they stick around.
Yeah, they're awesome, man. Yeah, I love the fact there's so many out there now. I mean, it used to be like, I think the Grainfather was the first real one to hit the market. Amazing unit, but a little out of some people's price range. Now you've got Grainfather, you got Clawhammer, you've got SS Brewtech, you've got Robo Brew. So many different options. Just so cool to see that. What's kind of funny to me is, I got into all grain brewing back in 2010, so 15 years ago. At the time, everybody I talked to was doing some form of batch sparge. In 2018, the survey, 30% of respondents said that they were doing batch sparge. In 2025, that dropped all the way down to 13%. So very few people these days are doing batch sparge. I actually still have a friend who that's the brewing method he relies on. It's same a number of people do fly sparge in 2025, which that's only down 6%, which says to me that, fly sparge brewers probably are more committed to their equipment than they are to the process. And they spend all this money and time building this incredible, semi-pro looking, at least, a fly sparge system. So they're just not going to get rid of it. It makes great beer, so why not? And then 2% of people said that they're doing full volume no sparge brewing. That might be kind of a part, batch sparge is very similar. So is brew in a bag. That's a no sparge approach as well. So, but interesting data anyways.
Oh yeah. Data is pretty interesting. It's cool to see the evolution in time, but it also makes total sense.
Yeah. It makes sense to me as well. So in terms of brewing setup, this is kind of a similar question, but we asked more specifically about how they're brewing, where they're getting their energy basically. In 2025, 67% of respondents said that they use electric. They're brewing with some form of electricity as opposed to gas. Wow, that's crazy. In 2018, it was just 27% of people. So talk about the increase in interest in these all-in-one electric systems. We kind of break it down and ask people if they're brewing indoors or outdoors. For those who responded that they brew on an electric system, 44% said that they're brewing indoors and 23% said they're brewing outdoors. I have a feeling some of those indoors considered in a garage indoors. I would consider that outdoor. Not a very important metric anyways, but 67% brewing electric compared to 21% of people brewing on propane outdoors in 2025. That was up 50% in 2018. 11% of people said that they brew on their natural gas stovetop indoors. That was down from 20% in 2018, so pretty substantial decrease. And then about the same number of people in 2025, 2% said that they're using natural gas to brew their outdoors. Like what I was doing prior to going electric. Yeah. That was 3% in 2018. So that's never really been a super popular approach. I loved it when I did it, but electric absolutely takes the cake.
Yeah, no, I mean, electric, like I said, it's got into that, and I wouldn't go, and I'm on a little bit hiatus right now in brewing, but I would immediately go back to electric. It just is like one less thing to go by. It's already ready to go. The flammability concerns, the wind. You have to be outdoors. There's just like the flexibility of electric is so much higher, and the quality is the same. Or I don't think there's any difference in quality. Like quality would not be a metric I'd be espousing with propane versus not. Other than the one thing I would say is like there is a limitation, which is your ability to get the right voltages. So in the United States, 120 or 120, 110 or 220, 210. Your ability to get the wattage as you scale up in batch size, right? So I'd say like if you're doing around 5 gallons and you can get a 120 circuit, then you're good to go. But you're going to go bigger, which is rarer, as you'll see in the data. There's not as many people making these larger batches, then you're okay. That's the one caveat, whereas propane can scale very rapidly. For the same propane system, you can bake as much beer as you want. So it's one little caveat I'll say, but it's still good. I think electric just takes the cake.
Yeah. I think most people who are brewing electric recognize that as well, and will probably be cheerleaders for brewing electric. So one thing that we've become really, advocates of is making sure that you're using good water, and we are not proponents of if it tastes good when you drink it, it'll taste good if you brew with it. I'm not a fan of that because I feel like it's kind of misleading. So we ask where people get their water from is one of the questions, and 33%, even today, 2025, despite all of the experiments we've done, despite all of the talk that water quality has gotten over the last few years, 33%, a full 1/3 of people still use unfiltered tap water. That blows my mind. That's down from 44% in 2018. So I suppose we're making some progress. 18% of people in 2025 said that they use home filtered RO water, and 13% said that they use purchased RO water. So 31% total are using RO water in some form, and that's up from 20% in 2018. So that's good to see. People are finally starting to take their water a little bit more seriously, and RO is a great starting point for that. 15% of respondents said they use filtered tap water. That I've done that because my water is very, very clean where I live, and so filtered tap water works really well for me. I also use Campden in it though to knock out any chlorine. 7% use distilled water, 5% use spring water, 4% use well water. That's pretty cool. And then 3% said that they use blended tap water, meaning that they're like blending RO or distilled water with their tap water to just change the mineral profile. I know that Malcolm Fraser does that. That's the way he was brewing when he was homebrewing. And then 1% of all of our respondents said that they use natural spring water from like a natural spring water source. When I was in Wellington, New Zealand, we actually went and got water to fill our water bottles from this really cool place downtown where it's just this spring, and you could fill up water bottles with this pure, fresh from the hills type of spring water. Really neat. Now, whereas 30% of respondents said they made no water chemistry adjustments in 2018, that number reduced to 19% in 2025, with a majority relying on Brewfather as their preferred calculator, which I think is cool.
Yeah, I think it's actually so interesting that water is clearly becoming important for everyone. You can see it in the data. I could just never I can never bring myself to do unfiltered tap water. I've had so many problems. I've had so many problems with it. So I
would never do that.
I would. It's just yeah. I mean, not to bag on anyone. If it's working for you, that's great. And I will say like phenols are like the most sensitive anything can be for anyone. Like a chlorophenolic would be like parts per billion for most individuals. So if it's causing a problem, you're going to taste it. It's impressive in my mind. It must just be that the water is just so low. Maybe it's the boil that's knocking out any of the issues. I don't know. But man, kudos to them. I mean, I would just never, because my time is so important, I would always use filtered water from the store. Or I would go and fill jugs from the store. And that was the time when I was renting, so I could never really install true RO in my house. Even though there's very nice systems now that are very convenient RO, I just never did that. I would just go buy the water, just faster for me. But it would just never take the risk. So.
No, I'm right there with you. I feel like I've been a cheerleader for using good water for years now. Another thing that we're known for is lager fermentation. Now, we've put out several experiments, comparing warm fermented lagers to cold fermented lagers in various forms, various approaches, all of that stuff. And we're kind of known for being the people who talk about fermenting lagers warm and not having any issue with this. Well, the fears expressed by some that we're trying to ruin homebrewing, at least lager homebrewing, by doing that, hopefully This next bit of data quells your concerns. 43% of respondents said that they still ferment their lagers cold with no pressure, just traditional old lager fermentation using nice lager yeast at cool temperatures. So a strong plurality there, not a majority, but a very strong, showing of people who still prefer traditional lager fermentation methods. More power to you. 14%, this was interesting to me, said that they use the quick lager method. This is, some people referred to it as the tasty method or the Narcissus method. I wrote about a method that I thought I had developed, but was very similar to what Tasty was doing. Mine was way less measured. Back in 2018, 41% of all of our respondents said that's how they were fermenting their lagers. Not anymore. It's 14%. So that flipped. Very interesting to me anyways. 13% of respondents said that they use lager yeast fermented warm but pressurized. So there's this weird idea out there that if you ferment lagers under pressure, then yeah, you can get away with doing it warm like we do without pressure. We have yet to prove at all that pressurization does anything during fermentation, at least on the homebrew scale. Perhaps on the commercial scale it does. 12% of people said they use lager yeast and they ferment warm with no pressure. That's kind of where I lie most of the time these days. By warm, I'm talking about 64 to 66 degrees Fahrenheit. I've had no issues doing that. 10% of people said that they use lager yeast cold, but still do it under pressure. I have a feeling that's probably more because of the gear that they have and their setup. 4% of people said that they make lagers using Kveik yeast. 3% said that they ferment their lagers warm with ale yeast. So a blonde ale. Yeah. And then 1% said that they ferment their lagers cold, but using ale yeast.
Yeah, I think if anything, I think Brülosophy brought a lot of analytics and a lot of thought in education. But I think the idea that lagers are not to be scared, they can be embraced, and there's many ways of doing them and making great beer is something that we can hang. I think we can hang our hats on, and it's in the data. I also there's an interesting corollary that beer in general is moving back or more towards a premium lager. You're getting out of the double IPA game and getting into these like hoppy pale lagers. And those kind of go hand in hand. So like the drinking idea or what you want to drink versus what you're making versus what's available to you. It's all going towards lagers, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it. And I think a lot of the people who hate the fact that we talk about fermenting lagers warm would be really upset to hear of the number of emails I get from people who tell me that they won some competition or they got gold in a competition with a warm fermented lager. I mean, it's way more common, I think, than people think. I think it's probably happening even in some commercial breweries that make excellent lagers and they're just not saying anything about it. Now, obviously, you are going to have adherence to tradition, and I love that. I'm not the type of person who says that my way is the right way, but I'm also not the type to diss people who do things differently than me. I fully embrace and appreciate the fact that you've got people out there making kick-ass beers using different methods than I use. So, but beer is not the only thing that we make. We also ask respondents to tell us what other types of fermented beverages they make. 38% of respondents, this is a pretty big number, said that they make cider. 23% said they also make mead. 18% said they make wine. 9% kombucha. 7% make hard seltzer. That was a zero probably 15 years ago. Yep. And 2% make sake, which I would love to try making at some point.
Mm-hmm. This in the end, like the beer is like the hardest thing you'll make with all of the gear. Maybe mead and wine, debatably much more cold side focused than hot side focused. But yeah, if you like fermented fruit, vegetable, grain beverages, these are all things you're probably going to try at least once. And I think I've made cider, or I made more of a mead that had a lot of apple juice in it. So I don't know if cider was what it was. Made a bunch of meads, made one wine, never made kombucha, made a hard seltzer, and never made sake. Really took to heart what Drew Beecham said is that he made sake once and he'll never make it again. So I just listened to Drew. I'll trust Drew. He did not like the process, though. I know plenty of people that made sake and they like it. So there you go. But it's easy because you have the gear. So
yeah, my thing with sake is that I love sake so much that I would hate to make a batch that didn't turn out because I would be so bummed.
Yeah.
But I've made a ton of cider. I've made a couple of meads. I'm just not a big fan of mead in general, or at least the ones that I make. I've had meads from friends who brew mead a lot, and they're phenomenal. I've never made wine, surprisingly, which I would love to because I live in an area that grows a ton of wine grapes. So it'd be easy for me to come across some actual fresh juice, grape juice to ferment. So things that I've made hard cider. I've never made kombucha. I don't like kombucha. It tastes like ketchup to me.
Sure.
And sake, yeah. yeah, as much as I would love to try to make it, I just don't. I'm probably going to have the same experience that Drew did. So. When asked about packaging methods, we're just asking specifically, do you keg, do you bottle, and then how do you carbonate? So 71% of people in 2025 said that they keg and force carbonate the majority of their beers. That's compared to 68% in 2018, so not a huge change there. 17% of people in 2025 said they bottle and do natural conditioning, so bottle conditioning. That is down from 30% in 2018. Wow, that's a pretty steep drop there. 8% said they keg and use a spunding valve for their carbonation, whereas 2% said they keg and naturally carb. So they basically keg condition or like bottle conditioning, but in a keg without the bottles.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly the idea to make your life easier and provide the best possible beer, which is the cold, no oxygen version, while also maintaining speed, because beer is aging as soon as it's bottled or packaged. So kegging all the way, especially if you can get the gear and you have the space to do the fridge or the kegging system. I mean, I think the big barrier is that the putting it all into cold storage is the biggest barrier.
Oh, without a doubt. So to me, I think there was a big, when homebrewers first started kegging, I mean, it was probably 20, 25 years ago that it became a thing that you started to see. And then when I was switching over to all grain, it was like, dude, you got a keg. I mean, if you're going to brew as much as you want, you're not going to have the time or the space to store all these bottles. Plus you get to drink it way sooner, weeks sooner usually. But you got to have the space for it. You got to have a kegerator or a keezer, all that stuff, which costs money. So I get it. Bottle conditioning, my brother, he hasn't been brewing for the last couple of years, but he would send me beers that he bottle conditioned using methods that I would, like, hey, this seems to be a good method for bottle conditioning. They were crystal clear, tiny little slug of yeast at the bottom that stayed put, kind of like a Sierra Nevada pale ale bottle, and just delicious beers. He was super good at it. So it's definitely not, that's not one of those things like extract where I'm on the fence. No, you can make excellent bottle conditioned beers. I find the convenience of kegging way worthwhile, and that's why I did that. So all right, so for this next set of questions, folks were given the option to completely agree or disagree with a statement, or slightly agree or slightly disagree as well, for a statement that we gave them. So I'm going to read the statement, and then I'm going to kind of give you the agree, neutral, or disagree. For the sake of saving time, we are going to combine either the agree or disagree. If they slightly agreed or fully agreed, those are just going to be under agree, because I don't want to read that over and over. What we're looking at here is the generalities. And so whether they agree, disagree, or if they're neutral on the statement, that's what we're going to be reading. So the first one, the statement is cold side oxidation is bad for beer. It degrades beer. 86% of people agree with that. 10% of people were neutral on it, and 4% of people disagree. 4% is nothing. But listen, 4%. What makes you think that cold side oxidation is not bad for beer? That blows my mind. We have done experiment after experiment. We have sacrificed whole batches of beer to prove that cold side oxidation is the bane of the brewer's existence. It is terrible for beer. So the fact that you would have the opinion that it doesn't matter, that's interesting to me.
This is just trolling.
It's gotta be, right?
Just trolling.
We're gonna capture some of that. And look, another aside, it wouldn't surprise me on every one of these surveys, you get some dumbasses who come in there and spew racist fucking bullshit on our survey because they think it's going to be funny. Grow up. I mean, come on, you're making a fool of yourself. Get out of here. You're the ones we don't want in this hobby.
Exactly.
So go find other people to be a dick with. The next statement was water chemistry is key to making quality beer. 82% agree, 7% are neutral, and 11% disagree. Look, if you put those 11% in neutral, I could sort of get it.
Yeah.
But to disagree that water chemistry, and maybe this is my bias, having been one of the brewers who's done so many water chemistry experiments that return significant results, that I could taste the impact. It's wild to me that people would disagree with that.
It's also funny that you had this large percentage that's doing unfiltered tap water, but yet agree that water is important. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. That's not for us to dig into. We're just reading the results here, Andy. So next statement was that all grain brewing makes better beer than extract brewing. Where would you go on that? Would you agree, disagree, or be neutral on that one?
Oh, I agree, but I have examples. I have counter examples where I think it's not like 100%. I think there's I alluded to this earlier that I have a couple recipes that when I teach an introduction to homebrewing class, how to make really good beer from extract to like lower the thought that it's a big process. So I think it's not every style, right? If I had to say if I had to brew all my beer a certain way, then yes, it'd be always all grain. But at certain ones, yes. So,
well, I'll tell you, the data on this is that 76% of the people agree that all grain is better than extract. 16% were neutral. Only 8% of people disagreed with that. That would likely be way different than the data from 10, 15 years ago, because there was a big push for anybody who had a voice in homebrewing to say that extract is equally as good as all grain. I think the fear was we don't want to, push people out who haven't jumped to all grain, making them afraid that they're not brewing the best beer possible. I don't know what to say. My experience has been that all grain, for more than just reasons of controllability, does produce a higher quality beer. That could just be my own palate or whatever. But I remember somebody challenged me. I'm not going to say his name, but they challenged me. Well, here's what I want you to do. Go get extra light dry malt extract. Do not use liquid malt extract. Yeah. I agree with him on this. It is not the fact that it's more expensive is because I think it takes more work to make or something. It's so gross. Liquid malt extract is awful. If you're going to brew with extract, get some dry malt extract and use it relatively fresh so it's not a big old rock when you're adding it to your water. But I went and bought fresh, super light dry malt extract. He said just use that. Add just Cascade hops, at 60, 30, and 5. Dry hop it, ferment it with Chico, and tell me that you don't think that's as good as an all grain batch. Well, I did that, but then I also made an all grain version of that same beer, and it was like everybody who drank it thought the all grain one was better. Was the extract one bad? Not in the slightest. It was delicious. We drank it. I'm not saying it's bad. I just feel like all grain makes better beer. There's less processing that goes into making it. So that is my crazy opinion for this episode, I guess. So sue me, right? All right. Next statement was that keeping dissolved oxygen low throughout the entire brewing process is important. We added this one when the whole Lodo LOB thing was getting popular. 45% of people, the highest rating on here, agree with that keeping dissolved oxygen low, even, when you're doing your mash and all of that is important for quality beer. Here's one that I disagree with. I just haven't seen the big impact of doing that. Now, I would probably have marked neutral on this if I had taken this survey myself. I wouldn't have put disagree because I've never done it and I don't really know. But I know a lot of people who have. 22% of people disagree with this and 33% were neutral on it. Again, that's where I'd probably rest myself.
I would have been a neutral because we've seen of the data. We've read the data. We've had the private conversations with people that agree with it or disagree with it. But, when it goes to like who's generally going to see it as an issue or see and taste it, right? Or qualitatively, feel it. I'm neutral on this.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, though. I'm glad we added that question. Here's one. This is somebody told me one time they responded, I think, to one of the past year's articles when we published these results. They said this is the Brülosophy effect in action. So we asked lagers. If you're brewing a lager beer, it requires cool fermentation to be good. 56% of people agree with that still, but 38% disagree. Look, that's a big number. 38% of 1,500 people. I get why people would look and say, this is the influence we don't want you having on brewer. Hey, look, people, it's just beer. This isn't, rocket science. 6% of people were neutral. Those are probably people who don't brew many lagers and they're just being honest. So.
Sure. No, I think it's, to get clean flavors from yeast, which I think lager is trying to capture. There's more than one way to ferment that beer. And that's what's captioned here.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things is we've done several lager fermentation temp experiments. Weihenstephan, the most popular, as they say, the most popular lager fermentation yeast out there in the world today. It's in its various forms, of course, seems to be insanely robust. We have done, with the exception of one experiment that I think Greg did, where he compared like an 86 degree fermentation temperature to 50 degrees or whatever it was. That one returned a significant result. Pretty much every other one that we've done has not. But using other yeasts, I believe Que Bueno from Imperial Yeast, which is the Grupo Modelo strain, and then my favorite Augustiner strain, the L17 Harvest, those did return significant results. But oddly enough, people reported the warm fermented beer as being more lager-like than the cool fermented beer. Explain that one to me. Yeah,
that's interesting.
That was one of the more interesting findings there. So the next statement that we give to respondents is decoctions have a noticeably positive impact on beer flavor. Before we get into the data, where do you fall on this one, Andy?
Oh, totally neutral. Maybe disagree, just because of every time people swear by it and then are found wrong. I'm sort of between neutral and disagree, I think.
Yeah. So last week, before Jordan and I recorded the episode from last week, we had a conversation about decoctions and the way that I've been talking about it. And he was asking me, he goes, do you really think that decoctions don't have any flavor impact? Or, is it that you just haven't experienced it yet? Or, and I had to clarify, no, I'm not hardcore either way. I would put myself in the neutral on this one because I've not performed a decoction myself. I have had a lot of beers that other home brewers and commercial brewers have decocted, and I don't taste like a crazy melanoid in flavor in those. And then we've done a couple decoction experiments. The first one, a triple decoction experiment, returned non-significant results. But Jordan reminded me that the other one was if it wasn't significant, it was close to significant. And he and I actually in that conversation designed his next decoction experiment because we are really curious to pan this one out. I do believe wholly that decoction was never intended, at least in the beginning, for flavor development as much as it was for conversion efficiency, using under-modified malt. And so if you got some flavor out of it, that's great. But I still think the primary reason it was used was, to eke every last bit of sugar out of those grains, out of those malts. So the next statement is first wort hopping leads to smoother bitterness. This is a topic that I feel like doesn't get much attention at all these days, but just, 5-10 years ago, it got talked about quite a bit. If you want to make, a nice West Coast IPA that's not sharply bitter, do a first wort hop. So in this, and we've done many experiments on this that have not, substantiated that claim whatsoever. Still to this day, 32% of respondents agree with that one, that first wort hopping leads to smoother bitterness. 54% are neutral, and only 14% of people disagree. I am solidly in the disagree camp on this one because I'm the one who did those experiments, and I know what they taste like.
Is it just because so many recipes call for it, so people believe it's important? I guess that's what I'm trying to parse here, because I would disagree as well. I guess so many old recipes talk about this as an important thing. I'm not sure what to say.
I think there's a lot of people who read recipes and see it and then just kind of, buy that as being meaningful. But there are, big names out there who talk about first wort hopping as having a notable impact on bitterness in beer. And I think that it's appeal to authority. It's a natural thing. I'm not dissing anybody for doing it, but if I was sitting here on, with the reach that we have, constantly talking about something like first wort hopping with certainty and no equivocalness, first wort hopping leading to a smoother bitterness, there'd probably be a good chunk of our listeners who would just accept that that's the truth, because you and I and the other co-hosts, we have this experience, and why not just trust them? So here's my saying that I don't think it has any impact whatsoever. So next statement is clear wort in the fermenter is key to producing clear beer in the glass. Yes. So the old great Trube argument. Where do you fall on this one?
Definitely disagree, because I've made so many Truby beers that didn't matter at all. So I'm going to disagree on this one.
I love the word Truby. I solidly disagree with this one. In fact, I would contend the exact opposite is true. There's something about fermenting with a decent amount of Trube that seems to lead to even clearer beer than if you ferment clear wort. If you start with really clear wort, I think it's the nutrients that are in Trube. The problem is there seems to be this point, I don't want to say of diminishing returns, because it's a fall off. When I rack beer or wort to a fermenter, I do so without letting all of the trub settle out, but I'm not racking 100% of the trub over to the fermenter. I just want a little bit in there for whatever magical reason it contributes to these things that I like. A really strong fermentation, clearer beer, a crisp flavor. I've also done the experiment comparing way too much trub to no trub, and that truby beer did not taste good. It had some of the telltale signs of like, I don't know, autolysis or something like that. It was kind of smoky and plasticky, like a phenol type flavor. So I'm in the disagree, but that's with the condition that you're not overdoing the trub. But for most people who have a valve on their kettle, you're not going to transfer all the trub out anyways. So. All right, next statement is that hot side aeration, yet another thing that I feel like doesn't get nearly as much attention these days as it used to, but that hot side aeration produces off flavors. 23% of people agreed with that, 38% were neutral, and 39% disagree.
Man, this is such a hard one because it's I want to know chemically it's doing something, but subjectively, taste-wise, nothing. So
this was one of the first, probably in like the first 10 experiments that I ever performed back when it was just me, and Brülosophy was kind of getting off the ground, and I beat the shit out of this batch of wort. From the mash all the way through to the wort. I stopped just short of pitching the yeast basically. And those beers tasted identical. I actually took these beers to, it was the National Homebrewers Conference, what became HomebrewCon, I think back in 2015, so 10 years ago. And that's where I collected my data. So we're talking some big names in homebrewing. And other than that, people who are very experienced beer drinkers, you would think they're discerning, and they could not reliably distinguish those beers. So I still, with the whole Lodo thing, the argument that I've heard is that, well, yeah, because both beers were technically aerated. You didn't take steps to reduce aeration in one. You just actively tried to aerate the other one. So for that reason, I'm kind of between neutral and disagree. I would say I'd slightly disagree with the hot side aeration one, but I'm kind of leaning in the disagree area anyways, just because of my experiences with hot side aeration. All right, here's a fun one. Gelatin finding strips beer of desirable aroma and flavor.
Oh, no way.
What do you think?
No way. Just doesn't. Or if it does, it's adjustable. If it does remove something, I think it's a fixable thing. But I don't think it does.
We have tested this one umpteen times, and we cannot figure out how to use gelatin to strip beer of anything other than haze causing, particulate matter. I get this idea. It's kind of, to me, it seems very naive, but I can understand how somebody would just presume at least that, all of that stuff that makes beer hazy is flavor. Yeah. Let's advertise the fact that we don't filter our beer. I don't think so. I think a lot of it doesn't need to be there, and it just makes the beer ugly, and in some cases can actually detract from the real flavor of the beer. Gelatin does. We have not been able to show at all that it has any impact on flavor or aroma. Neither does Clarity Firm, Biofine, Clear. Yeah, all of these other fining agents. We have not been able to show that it changes the perceptible character of beer at all. So if you like clear beer, use what you want to try to clear it up. It doesn't seem to have an impact. In fact, I would, if you want to mechanically filter your beer, I don't think that's going to strip out, hop flavor or aroma either. To me, it was just a big marketing scheme by craft brewers who didn't know how to make clear beer back in the 90s. So I'm still using gelatin. Every time I brew a beer that I want to be clear, gelatin's my go-to. All right, next statement was boiling for less than 60 minutes leads to dimethyl sulfide, DMS. What do you think about that one?
I have a story about this, actually. There was my first BJCP test. I had only taken the tasting exam once, but one of the beers that you're given blind, you're just told to judge it to style. It definitely tasted odd, like it had odd flavors, but it wasn't like a bad beer, right? And then we come to find out that the person tried to generate DMS, shut lid, boil a long time, only Pilsner malt, and no one could taste DMS. I think maybe one person could. And they kind of just showed me like, all these off flavors, like they may have existed 20 or 30 years ago, but the market, the commodity market has removed them from possibility. Much like how Marshall and I grew up with chicken pox. Kids after a certain age will never know what chicken pox are.
Yep.
I'm sure DMS was a problem 30 years ago, back when I don't know how they were making grain, but it doesn't exist. So
we have tried over and over and over again to make a beer using, I have boiled with the lid on for the entire time. That steam has to escape, and it's powerful enough to push your lid up and escape. I mean, the volumes, when I compared a batch boiled with the lid off and with the lid on for 60 minutes, albeit, they were the same post-boil volume. They were the same OG. So I think that's, just a myth that somebody must have made up because they thought condensation dripping back into the wort's bad. I've boiled worts for 15 minutes, no DMS. I have actually done twice now DMS flavor standard samples, and when you get it to the threshold of being I taste it very easily. I happen to be somebody who is particularly, seemingly at least, more sensitive to DMS than I am diacetyl. It's not a good flavor. It tastes like warm ketchup to me, or it doesn't taste like corn, which is what a lot of people say, but it is a sulfur compound. So you have to understand that there's whatever sulfury thing is there. I've heard people describe it as cooked broccoli, which to me just smells like dog farts. But I love eating it. Don't judge me. But yeah, anything lower than a 60-minute boil leading to DMS, I feel like that is one that has been kind of pushed to the wayside. And sure enough, only 12% of people agreed with that one on this survey. 65% of people disagreed with that. I would bet $1 million that 20 years ago, those would have been flipped.
Yeah.
That people are changing. They're evolving the way they think about this. Only 23% of people were neutral on it. Again, I appreciate the honesty there. My hunch is those are people who just always brew for 60 minutes anyways. So, whatever. I don't have firsthand experience. Another old school thing that people used to talk about that I feel like doesn't get focused on much these days is transferring to secondary. So you ferment in your primary for, 5 to 7 days, and then you let all that trub settle out, and then transfer just that as clear as the wort would be or the beer would be, transfer it to a secondary fermenter, often a 5-gallon glass carboy, and then you let it condition in there for a few more days, maybe a week or so before going on to packaging. This was one of the first things that I ditched after moving to all grain because of how annoying it is. So does it lead to a better beer if you transfer to a secondary? Well, 71% of people who responded to our survey don't think it does. They disagree with this statement. 14% are neutral on it, and only 15% agree. To me, that's still a pretty hefty number of people who think that transferring to secondary is good for beer.
Yeah, no, it's something that just started. I mean, I remember when I got my first kit, it was like a requirement. Oh, you need 2 fermenters. You need to let this thing settle out. And I think this really just is a evolution from winemaking, that they do require secondary and tertiary for fining purposes to get everything to settle out to make a clear product. And oxygen is so much not as an issue that is with beer. Oxygen and warm storage is just not the same process in winemaking. The tannin structure, how wine evolves, has actually been naturally kind of self-selecting in some way to increase. Oxygen is part of it. It's not important, but they add things like KMS and Camden tablets to reduce the oxygen influence, so it's not as big of a deal.
Yeah.
So it's good. But again, I think none of brewing needs any type of secondary storage unless it's cold.
Yeah, I mean, you could consider, when you rack from primary to a keg and then put the keg in the keezer or something, that's a secondary, and you're just serving from your secondary, whatever. That's not what true adherence to the whole racking to secondary are talking about. Mm-hmm. I remember the first time I brewed a sour beer, again, this was probably 12, 13 years ago now. Again, people were like, well, this is one area where you got to use a secondary. No, didn't do it. And the sour beers turned out fine. There's a lot of, again, flexibility in terms of a lot of these things that we do. And just knowing that you don't have to do all of these laborious processes and you can still produce a really kick-ass batch of beer, I think makes it a little bit more approachable to people. All right, final question that we're going to address on this episode. One of my favorites, it's been included since the very beginning, it's not a question, it's a statement. Macro beer, so Bud Miller Coors, is evil and should be avoided at all costs. As a Miller Lite adherent who wishes that Miller Lite would sponsor us in everything that we do, I think you know where I stand on this. What about you, Andy?
I mean, I think probably when I started homebrewing, I was so like, oh yeah, craft beer all the way. I'm definitely not that anymore. I think there's a macro beer for everyone. Put it that way.
Amen. And I have no qualms with it. And I remember somebody was just trying to, beat me up over the fact that I drink Miller Lite and I talk about it and I don't pretend to just drink craft beer. And I said, who do you think spends more money on the hops that you get after the fact? The hop industry survives today because of big beer. You look at hops and grain, those industries would not be able to survive if they weren't getting the injection of millions and millions of dollars from big beer. Those are the same people that we're buying hops and grains from. You know what I mean? So you can try with the whole virtue signaling and all of that to convince me that I'm a bad guy because I drink Miller Lite and I like Corona and whatever. That's fine. I don't take it to heart whatsoever. I fully disagree that macro beer is evil and should be avoided. And so do 65% of the people who responded to this survey. Some interesting comparison here. So 13% said neutral. Only 22% of people agreed with this statement that macro beer is evil. Compared to 2018, mind you, this wasn't even our first survey. It's just the first time that we have the data for this that I could find at least. It went down. So we're 22% agree in 2025, 39% agreed in 2018. So there's been a shift. There's been a move, it seems, away from this kind of negative perspective of the greater beer industry, which makes me happy because I just feel like if we can all open ourselves up to the whole thing, it might actually help save beer in general. We're Bud, Miller, and Coors are suffering, maybe not as much, but they're suffering just like craft brewers are, just like the home brewing industry is, and we're all a part of the same big bubble. So let's not foster this perspective of hate. At least that's my perspective. What are your thoughts?
No, see, agreed. I think the thing with macro beer is that you get a sense that it's not of the same quality of a craft beer, and that's because craft really told a different story. But in actuality, if you go and talk to professional macro brewers, their quality metric is a little different, but they're still obsessed with quality. It just might be on the price or the consistency or the lack of flavor, so to speak, right? But they're still very good beers. And I think what I found is when you first try macro beer, like say you first start drinking and you get like a Coors Light or something like that, and you're like, oh, okay, I don't know. And then you try craft beer. It's like upgrading your food from like microwave food to like cooking a meal, right? Oh, okay. There is still a time and place for a packet of ramen. And you will find if you drink enough, I think maybe it's changed now because Hamm's has existed for decades or whatever, and all these beers have existed for a long, but they're actually, those are the ones I go for the most, or Modelo or something like that, where I actually like the balance of flavors they've chosen, where there is nuance within macro that maybe people kind of ignore psychologically, that they think it doesn't exist. No, it absolutely exists in the macro beer segment. Without
a doubt. And I know that it's not macro, but it has the appeal. Have you tried the new Kirkland Signature Lager yet?
I have. It is a very good beer.
My God. It's so good. I had it for the first time. The last time Kirkland Signature, Costco came out with like a light beer or whatever, it was god awful.
Kirkland Light was terrible. Absolutely, yes.
Oh, it was so bad. So I was over at Tim's house on Friday night, just a couple days ago, and I opened up his beer fridge. He's like, "Oh, those red ones are the new Costco ones. It's not very good." And I looked at him and I said, I just learned that this was brewed by Deschutes Brewery and that it's a Munich Helles. And I pick up the can and sure enough, it's plastered all over the can that it's from Deschutes. And I cracked that thing. You better believe I will have Kirkland Signature Pilsner or whatever it was in my, or lager, they call it lager, in my fridge henceforth. It is so good. And the fact that you've got this, let's just call Costco big grocery or whatever, and that they're supporting Deschutes Brewery, who I think is just an insanely good Pacific Northwest brewery, and they're making this great beer that looks like a macro lager. I mean, how cool is that? I don't know. I think it's pretty badass. Yeah.
It's very well done, very well executed beer, and kudos to Deschutes for getting that account because it's going to be doing just fine for them now. Yes,
I think it might blow them up. But that is all the time that we've got for this episode. What we touched on was just a portion of the data collected in our 2025 General Homebrewer Survey. If you would like to view all of it, we put the link to the article in the description of this episode. There's a ton more that we just didn't have time to get to. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Brülosophy Show, at youtube.com/at at The Brülosophy Show. That's the @ symbol followed by The Brülosophy Show. No umlaut needed. If you're listening to this podcast, we're confident you're going to love the videos Martin's creating over at YouTube as well. And make sure to head to Brülosophy.com to stay current on all of the fun beer and brewing stuff we are up to. The Brülosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to Brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit Patreon.com/Brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman, no